Hi, from northeast of Scotland to Santa Fe. It's wonderful that you're sitting there in the sunshine in the morning, and we're sitting here slightly chillier later in the day. But, um, but I have fond memories of Santa Fe, and I really cannot tell you how much I appreciated your wonderful book,
Okay.
um, because it is wonderfully, beautifully written, as are your Substacks. And it touches you, the reader, in ways. And that wonderful poem you've got at the beginning about Eris disappearing in a flame, standing outside the wall, disappearing into a flame. She starts the process and then goes off into the great hereafter. So it really is very touching. How did you first get into contact with Eris?
Well, I don't know that I can necessarily identify the first moment. I've always been intrigued by the research that's being done at Caltech with the bodies that they have been finding. And so I think I was just drawn to that, out of interest to learn about with some new astronomy, some new astrology at the same time. And in the midst of that, when I put Eris into my own chart, lo and behold, she was right there conjunct my moon. And I guess that just created some kind of liminal space that I just tumbled into.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and you went on from there because astrology is in a burgeoning field at the moment. All sorts of exciting new developments are coming out, which can be a little bit confusing. I feel sorry in a way for new students because even us oldies are having problems trying to cope with what are very interesting findings about Eris. I mean, when I looked into what Eris had done through the last century, it was just astonishing. And of course, I'm quite interested in history. And as you point out in the book, the last time Eris was in Aries really was cataclysmic for the world. Well, not cataclysmic. I mean, it changed. The Roman Empire, which had been around for 1,500 years, disappeared. And life began to change incredibly. And we're now moving into the same kind of gear paradigm shift, if you like.
That's what she does. Uh, yes, I am right there with you and have, great interest not only in learning myself, but wondering as well as you how somebody coming to this field can begin to absorb it and digest it and actually begin to work with it. And I'm going to be a little bit, what's the word I want to use? Idiocentric here, because the type of astrology that I works with solves all those problems before we start. Because we cannot just look at a chart and say, where do I begin? What's it all about? How do I work with this chart? With the evolutionary astrology, it's quite specific that the entry point into any chart anybody we're looking at is through Pluto. And once we begin to analyze and understand how Pluto and the Pluto paradigm, which includes the lunar nodes, is working in that chart, everything falls into line, including Eris. Everything else becomes a supporting actor or actress to the
Isn't
Pluto
that
paradigm.
interesting? Yeah. Because I tell you, when I started doing consulting astrology a long time ago, if there was one planet that I found people look blank about, I would say, you've got Pluto in the fourth, this means this, that, and the other. And they'd go, I don't understand that. Pluto seems for a lot of people to be beyond their reach almost.
Well, that's Pluto's realm. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Pluto would rather hide in the shadows than, be out front. He comes out front when he works with any of his colleagues, so to speak, in the solar system. But he's not that difficult to understand. The reason he is seems to be so far removed from our understanding is because he represents what we have brought in with us from the past. And
Mm.
that is hidden from us at birth. We don't get to see, mentally what we have done in prior lifetimes. We learn
Mm,
it, in the first 7 years of our lives up to the first Saturn square through our emotional body.
mm,
Well,
mm.
Pluto was water. It's emotions. So we learn about Pluto emotionally. We don't necessarily learn about Pluto mentally. And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
takes we have to have a lot of miles on our tread
Mm.
before we begin to get that kind of understanding emotionally about who we are.
It needs maturity. You need a bit of life under your belt before you begin to look at it. But it's interesting. So, how would you connect Pluto to the North Node if you're talking about what you bring in with you?
If Pluto, I'm going to break it down in four directions here. Pluto, let me back up a minute here. Everything in the universe has a polarity. We live in a polar universe. So there are polarities for all the planets, including Pluto. We're not just
Mm,
talking about the planet itself. And getting into polarity, the polarity points of all the planets is becomes kind of an esoteric adventure for most people. They don't even know it exists, let alone begin to explore it. And
mm,
there's too much of it to really get into it tonight in this discussion. But there is a very important polarity to Pluto, and that is called the Pluto polarity point, which is 180 degrees opposite in the chart. So if
mm,
Pluto represents the lessons from the previous lifetime or lifetimes, could be plural. In other words, what we have been working on in the past, I guess, is the best way to encompass it all. The
mm,
polarity to Pluto by opposite house and sign it defines what it is that our soul is intending us to work on going forward in this lifetime. And the
ah,
important word here is soul because we are not us. We're not flesh and blood. We're
mm,
soul. It's our soul experience itself over many lifetimes through
yeah.
our earthbound experiences. And I'll take that one more difficult leap. It's all happening at once. I believe I don't believe in time in a sense. I believe that it's not linear whatsoever. But the point being is that we're working with past life experiences. So
Mm,
Pluto holds that signature, and it's the polarity point, which is where our soul is intending us to go, but it's only a probable future because
mm,
if you pick up a gun and you shoot somebody, it doesn't matter what your Pluto polarity point, unless that happens to match. That's it. You're done in this lifetime. You've already chosen what's going to happen. But for most of us, we don't get that extreme. We are like there's a tractor beam inside of us, again, an energetic, emotional tractor beam that
mm,
draws us towards our future potentials. And
yeah.
the question, it's through our moon, the security of our moon, whether or not we're willing to go in that direction or whether it's we're going to still hold on to what we know and what's comfortable.
Mm,
The the north node of Pluto, the south node of Pluto, excuse me, the lunar south node holds that information. Pluto
mm,
derives what it knows from that lunar south node because the lunar south node is a compilation of our previous emotional natures, of who we were emotionally in the past. So this
yeah.
this is what Pluto was working with as a basis of understanding of what's happened. The
Mm,
the the north node being the potential is going to link to the Pluto polarity point being the potential forward is going to link up with the lunar north node and it is
yeah.
going to describe that future trajectory. The lunar nodes are our karmic evolutionary trajectory forward, but
Yeah.
it is not set in stone. We change it and it can change it at any
True.
moment depending
Yeah.
on the decisions we make down here on Earth.
Yeah. And Eris comes into this equation in order to, because my impression of Pluto is it can, for certain personalities, not budge an inch, whereas Eris comes in and creates enough chaos to push through into a crisis and make positive changes.
Yes, it's another core principle of EA called karmic necessity. We
Yeah.
we don't change because we think we should change or because somebody tells us to change. Long-term smokers,
Mm.
smoke for 40 years and everybody in their life says stop smoking. It's not until they have a heart attack and maybe try to get up and walk around some will reach for a cigarette immediately. Some will say, "No, I'm going to stop smoking." It takes crisis for us to change. We don't change without crisis, and
mm,
it's an unfortunate truth about human experience that
mm,
we have to have and it's what's happening in the world. Everything that we see around us, whether it's climate change or
mm,
whatever it is that we're dealing with in each country that we live in is that karmic necessity to move forward. And it's where, Pluto will, it's like used to be a commercial we would hear all the time, do you hear me now? Do you hear me now? I don't know if you remember that or you're familiar with it. Well, Pluto will ask two, maybe three times if you hear me now. By the
yeah.
third time, it's not going to ask again. It's just going to pull the rug out from under us.
Mm.
Eris doesn't give us three chances. Eris shows up, she tosses the apple, and what's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like that lovely poem about falling in a pothole in the road. Do you know that poem?
I don't.
No, you fall in a pothole and you blame the pothole. And the next time you fall back into it and you blame it again, and you fall back into it and you blame it. And the fourth time or whatever, you suddenly begin to think, maybe if I walk round it, look that poem up. It's a wonderful poem. It's all about
I,
how to change after 18 experiences of getting it all wrong. But,
I love that idea because it ties in with another understanding that I also have of our evolution. It that we are water. Okay, again, the moon,
yeah,
water, sun, our emotions. Water flows on uninterruptedly over anything that it passes over. So if it comes to a pothole, water moves through that pothole and then
yeah,
passes on. But
yeah,
the issues for us as human beings making decisions about where we're going to try and change the direction of that water, and I don't know if
yeah,
you've ever tried to move a river, it's not an easy thing to do. So we refuse to go down into that abyss to do the
yeah,
work that's necessary in that abyss about ourselves before
mm,
the water will flow and fill that space karmically and psychologically, and so
yeah.
that we can actually grow through it.
Yes, I love
Interesting.
how in the spiritual world people talk about transformation in a kind of blissful way. And I've been through various transformations in my life, and they are very painful.
Right.
And the only thing you understand about change, at least I do in my advanced years, is you got to take a step backwards because it's not going to be a straightforward route through.
Right.
It's worth it if you can do it, but it's not a happy experience. So, I mean, it really, that whole Pluto and the Phoenix, you've got to get down to the ashes before you can begin to rebuild.
You
Um,
got it. Yes.
it, a What fascinates me at the moment about Eris is we've got a conjunct Chiron, and that seems to me quite a significant combination of energies. Because I was looking at various charts before this, and John F. Kennedy was born in 1917 when there was a previous Uranus Eris Chiron conjunction. Julian Assange was born much later on, obviously, with it. What does it actually mean that the wounded healer comes together with the catalyst?
There's never one meaning
Mm,
for starters. We
yeah.
have to understand that two babies born side by side in the hospital minutes apart are going to have
Mm,
entirely different life stories. And
mm,
that includes twins born in
mm,
the same family minutes apart. So why is this? This is because it's not about just the aspect or the planets or centaurs or
mm,
whatever it is that's involved. It's about the consciousness that's brought to that combination, to that interaction. And so what happens with John Kennedy is going to be different than, say some mass murderer who was maybe born near them. They're going to respond psychologically and emotionally
oh,
differently
sure.
with that.
Yeah.
So, but in general, what if we look around and obviously I'm the best observer of my own country. With Chiron and Eris, what we're looking at is we're healing wounds, national wounds that have
Mm,
festered for 250 years.
mm,
We're-
mm, mm,
Chiron is the wounded healer. he was wounded himself, yes, but he turned that experience into his ability to medicate everybody else who could come to him
Mm,
homeopathically. So
mm,
it's what we're going through, and we are on a long-term trajectory to begin to heal some of these sins of the father, so to speak, whether it's
mm,
segregation, misogyny, racism, usurpation of Indian lands, all these
mm,
things that we have failed to claim as our true history and kind
mm,
of mask them over with, some glorification of it. But
mm,
we've got some ghosts, in our closet, and it's all coming out.
mm.
I'm in a different place with Donald Trump than everybody else. And don't get me wrong, I am not a Trumper by any form, shape, or description. But
Mm.
he is the karmic necessity that this country needs. We have procrastinated and dragged our feet for too many years. We fought a civil war. We were not a United States at all. We divided economically. It took another 100 years. We had a civil war, and that didn't change anything. Slavery just became segregation. Nothing has changed. You
Yeah,
see?
yeah.
Nothing. There has not been any real, authentic change. We're going to see those changes now, whether we like it or not.
Well, I hope you're right. I wrote a book some years ago about the last 2000 years in history. And if there's one thing it taught me, it was that history goes in cycles. It goes round and round. And okay, it makes a bit of progress, but actually a lot of things don't, And if you look at Hitler in Germany, it took the outside world to come in and smash that setup, which had been around for what, 25 years at that point. Russia is still undergoing all sorts of horrors. And Tibet, I mean, is it ever going to get out of the mess it's in? Probably not. So I hope you're right. And it's always been a slight surprise to us on the West, if you like, away from America, of un how blind Americans are to what the reality of the situation has been. I think the Brits were well aware that they made a bit of a botch of the colonial empire. They made a success of it as well. But, I mean, I don't think anyone was ever in any doubt that there were a lot of bad things done. But somehow Americans always wanted to be nice. And so it's all this kind of putting up a front. And it's very painful when that front comes down. I hope you're right, but I'm not utterly convinced it's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, it may be a very, very long time.
It's going to take through the end of 2030. And
Yeah.
it's another manuscript that I've been working on called Nine Gates.
Mm.
There are going to be nine squares from
Oh, yeah.
Eris to
Mm.
Pluto in the U.S. chart. I think we've talked about
Yeah.
this or you mentioned it. This is the undercurrent of what's happening in the United States right now. It's been going
Yeah.
on since
Mm.
2004. Eris is a 577-year orbit. So this didn't
Yeah.
just start yesterday. And Pluto, the Pluto point in the U.S. chart is because it's the
Yeah.
natal chart, it's like stuck there. It's not moving. So we've got a very slow moving planet moving over a fixed point in the sky, or
Yeah.
in the chart. So this is a long transit. It's going to play out till 2052 until this
Yeah.
the last of the nine squares goes. Retrograde, direct, retrograde, direct, retrograde, direct, nine times over a single point. Uh,
Mm.
Eris spends 4 years over every single point in the zodiac,
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
going direct and retrograde. That's why she is so impactful, because
Yeah.
she totally drills down. Sedna, we haven't talked about Sedna, but Sedna is 11,000 years. So we're looking at some very, very long progressions here
Mm.
that we can't even begin to imagine the finality of them. Though I'm beginning to get glimpses
Yeah.
of where we are going with Eris.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because when you look at the Middle East, I mean, the Middle East has always been in turmoil. I mean, always for the last. I visited Syria many years ago on holiday, which was a lovely, very poor country, but lovely. And the guide was telling us about their history, and they'd been invaded by everyone from whoever back in 8000 BC all the way through. It's always been a melting pot. And you wonder if that's ever going to change. It's worse at the moment. It will get better at some point. But some countries, I suppose some individuals are fated to hold difficult energy.
What's more controversial and difficult to everybody agree to except religion?
Mm.
Okay. It's
Um,
it's 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 the seat of so many world religions.
I wrote a piece recently for my website on, would you believe, the great English philosophers of the Enlightenment. And to a man, they all said, get religion out of politics, get it out of culture, keep it
Right,
to yourself and get on with it.
right,
And I mean,
exactly.
I grew up in the west of Scotland where the Roman Catholic Protestant schism was alive and well and kicking. So wherever you go, religions tend to run slap into one another. Which,
There's only two things that men will go to war about. One is money and the other is religion.
oh, do let us get back to Eris, because looking through various charts, what intrigued me, Nelson Mandela and Benjamin Netanyahu, whatever you think about him, both have Eris in the fourth house. And it seems to me quite significant that Mandela was so focused on South Africa, his country. He wanted to evolve it. And Benjamin Netanyahu, going the wrong way about it, but I mean, he's always been a protector of his country. And that is where Eris seems to uh, come alive, if you like, in a chart and kind of make it work. I'm not saying what's happening in the Middle East is making it work, but there seemed to be something very important. Would you like to talk about some of the house positions of Oprah Winfrey?
Sure, sure.
Third house, wonderful communication, her absolute thing.
Just to you reflect for a moment on what you just
Yeah,
raised. I'm bringing up my notes. I have to
yeah.
reveal that I actually have notes for this because I can't remember every chart in my head. But when we're talking about the fourth house is how we see ourselves. It's our ego.
Mm,
So when somebody sees themselves in that as the significator of that national identity,
yeah.
that's the result that we get. Not
Mm,
everybody with Eris or Pluto in the fourth house is going to be that, nationally, but they're going to be very much about who they are and what it is that they
mm,
believe,
mm,
again, according to their realm.
yeah.
So, so you asked about Oprah. Oprah was born in poverty and instability. And the reason I start with this is because, again, in EA, we can't just look at a chart and begin to understand that chart just from the
Mm,
natal placements of the planets. We have to understand the person. We have to understand what their life has been about and what they bring to that chart. And
mm,
once we have a handle on the nature of the personality itself,
mm,
then we can begin to use that as a roadmap to navigate, look at their Pluto, look at their lunar nodes, look at what's going on in their chart.
mm,
And from any direction, we can even, I don't just jump in and look at the moon, but we can understand what's happening because we have some history. We have a photo, a snapshot of that
mm,
person's life that is a reflection of the chart. They each reflect each other. So that's why I always start with a bio. All,
mm,
all of my chart delineations in my book all include a short bio because we have to
mm,
understand who it is we're working with. So at any rate, so she was a media figure. She was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist. She was fabulously successful, but she rose from poverty and instability.
mm, mm,
She became one of the most influential voices in modern culture.
mm, mm,
She reshaped television, she reshaped storytelling, and she actually changed public dialogue.
mm.
I think my either my Wi-Fi or yours or one of them is halting a little bit.
Mm.
So Eris is in Aries. We all just back up a minute. We everybody on the planet has Eris in Aries.
Yeah, yeah.
She ingressed in the early 1920s. So unless you were born before then, and I don't think there's anybody left on the planet that old,
Mm,
everybody's got Eris. So one of the things that I teach anybody about their chart is that you don't look at the sign. It's not like any other planet. We have to look at the house that Eris is in, and this is what you've done. You've
mm,
identified the house where Eris exists because that's the primary characteristic of how Eris
mm,
is going to respond. It's
mm,
the archetype of that house. So she's a third house Aries,
mm,
third house Eris. Her moon's in Sagittarius in the 11th house, trining Eris. So it's her emotion and her voice. They're totally aligned. What she
mm,
feels is what she says. She speaks her
mm,
truth, and what she says resonates. There's a
mm,
tremendous power in her voice and in
mm,
her communication. It's direct, it's honest, it's fearless.
mm,
Eris in the third house speaks truth. It challenges norms and it names what others are ready to avoid. And the
mm,
11th house expands that reach.
mm,
It's the collective. So her early life matters are really important here. She
mm,
experienced abuse and instability, but this
mm.
created depth. It gave her empathy. It gave her understanding of pain so that she could understand what others might be going through, even if it was a different set of circumstances than her own.
Mm.
Her voice comes from a lived experience. It's not something that she read in a book or because her
Mm,
mother or father was that way. It was her.
mm,
Um, and her Eris does not disrupt through force, though. She's not when she tosses her apple, it's more like a gentle ball, rolling down the alley. It's not going to go crashing through, but yet it
yeah.
still has tremendous force because it
Mm.
disrupts truth of what's going on. She brings hidden experience into the open, and she changes the conversation. Right? She changed the conversation with everything done on television.
She's got a really interesting chart because that Neptune in the 10th is wonderfully healing, given her background. And that Mars Pluto square she's got of Mars and Scorpio, I mean, she had a very abusive childhood, was nasty.
Yeah.
And yet somewhere she survived it and it inculcated tremendous strength, which I think is lovely. And it always, Sagittarian moon always makes me laugh. I don't know why, but they're over optimistic. And I used to be, being very saturnine, look down on people who were over optimistic. But the older I've got, the more I understand those who survive are those who are optimistic. They crazy it may be at times, but they always assume there's something better around the next corner. And that pulls them through. Whereas those who are maybe a bit more realistic would kind of give up. But no, I think that Sagittarius moon is lovely for her. It does her the world of good. Um, but no, she's a really interesting personality, and how she carries the weight of all that money. I mean, I know that sounds odd, but being that big a personality is not easy. Being out in the public eye and trying to cope with that lifestyle, she would need the kind of inner strength that, oddly enough, Mars Pluto gives her. You know, it nearly destroyed her as a child, but somewhere out of it, she came out of it with a titanium backbone. Um, it, so no, I think she's lovely. And Maya Angelou was one of the others in your book. Um,
Well, just to add or
yeah, sure.
respond to a couple of things you said, Neptune in the 10th house, she connected herself to the entire world community through her
Mm,
communication system.
mm,
I think that really reflects that 10th house Neptune, where
mm,
where there was no boundaries for her in terms of
yeah.
her connection to the world around her.
Mm,
Uh, her her personality and her ability to balance her wealth and her power is a little bit controversial here in the States because what she has done to the island of Hawaii, according to her neighbors and the people who live there, is not necessarily the kind of neighbor that we would like to have. And I'll just point that out. Now, I don't know,
Yeah.
again, there's all sides to every story, but
Sure. Nobody's
this is
perfect.
but she's buying up all the land around her,
Yeah.
she's really exerting her will and her wealth.
Mm,
And not everybody is comfortable with it.
mm,
She's changed the nature of the island that she lives on, and that's not always a good thing. People go there because there's a refuge or a sense of safety or some
yeah.
distance from the rest of the world, and
Mm,
she dropped it on their heads. Yeah, she landed right in the middle of all that. So,
yeah.
but again, I mean, we have to understand that, would we be any different? You know,
Yeah, no. Well, nobody's perfect. And I
right?
mean, I have a huge respect for people who pull themselves out of really awful circumstances. And they're not going to turn out to be paragon. Well, nobody is a paragon of virtue anyway. Now, why Maya Angelou interests me is I have a fascination for the eighth house. I have no planets in the eighth, but some of my family do, and I've never ever understood the eighth house at a gut level. I mean, and Maya Angelou has her Sun, Jupiter, and Eris and Uranus all in her eighth. So, how would you characterize that?
At the age of 7, she was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend.
Mm, mm, mm,
Okay.
mm.
So she actually didn't speak for years.
Yeah. Mm, mm,
Okay.
mm,
That's the eighth house. That's she, it's where we bury the traumas that we have no ability to reconcile, to deal with.
mm,
And
mm,
it becomes it's what the what it's called soul loss,
mm,
where we actually sever off part of ourselves, part of our soul, part of our being, so that
mm,
we can function in the world. But it's still there, and it gnaws at us. It doesn't
mm,
ever really go away. It's the work of psychiatrists and therapists.
mm,
We all have Mercury in our chart. Mercury can enter the underworld unharmed. So,
mm,
if we are strong enough, we can go into that place and we can examine it and begin to work with it. But
mm,
most of us need a guide. And
mm,
so that's creates the whole therapeutic community for us. But that's what's happening there. It's where we've buried something about our past that
mm.
we just cannot come to terms with.
Yeah, no, it can't be brought to consciousness.
Right.
Um, and yet, quite a few people who have strong eighth houses have tremendous influence. It's almost an unconscious ability to project something out into the world. Not everybody, obviously, but um, it works in really very mysterious ways. Well, eighth house is very Pluto. Um, and she's got what, four, and Sedna um, in the eighth. And like Oprah Winfrey, she had such a terrible background, and yet she rose above it.
I'm an eighth house moon Aries. Uh,
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm,
and again, I think that that's part of what brought me to Eris herself.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So, what else do we want to be looking? And Marilyn Monroe, of course, had an eighth house heiress, which is because she had a really, we must get off all the tragic lives. Not everybody had a tragic past. It, and where do you go from here? You were telling me about the siblings of Eris. Um,
Yeah.
how can an astrologer work with the siblings of Eris? That's what I wanted to know.
Well, I don't know that we necessarily work with each of the siblings or offspring individually. What's important to understand is that these are all of the offshoots. And I'll read through them, and then so we can get an
Hmm.
overview and understand it. Uh, her Eris was born of the night. She had
mm,
no father. She precedes, she's primordial. She precedes the all of the genealogy that we use as part of our astrology. None of those beings were on the planet when Eris
yeah,
was born. So
mm.
that's the first thing we have to understand. She's different. She's very, very different. She comes from a different set of original, original birth.
So
Um,
she's before Gaia and Uranus.
oh yeah, she was
Oh
born of
yes, way
Nick.
back. Yeah,
She
yeah,
was born of the night,
yeah,
and
yeah,
night was the first primordial goddess.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
okay? So she had no father.
Mm,
So,
mm,
so she's a different kind of being. I
mm,
don't even know that I have the words really to describe what she was because it's not anything that we're familiar with in our reality.
mm,
But she had siblings.
mm,
She had siblings. Moros, which is sorrow, which unavoidable destiny.
mm,
Thanatos, which is death. Hypnos, which is rest or sleep. Oises, which is misery. Apathy, which is deception, nemesis, which is a consequence, and Keres, which is violent death. These were her brothers and sisters. Okay, so she
oh,
so
wonderful.
yeah, exactly. This is her family. This is who she grew up with and played with outside in playground. This was her playground.
Yeah.
So she doesn't actually these effects in our life that we call destiny came through her, but through the nature of her siblings
Mm,
exactly, not through her. And then her children were actually enacted the results of these events that the
mm,
siblings created. So they created the siblings created an inevitability, but the offspring actually enacted the process. So, for instance, Moros, which is death, it seals his fate. What she destabilizes, apathy distorts, and what she exposes, nemesis answers, and what she sets in motion, the Keres complete. So, in other
mm,
words, Nakia begins the quarrel, Sudia distorts the truth, Dysnomia dissolves the order. I can't pronounce this. I never took Greek in school. His Mine and Makai erupt into conflict. Phonoi and Androstaki spill blood. Algia and Limos ensure the cost is felt. And Ate brings the final collapse. And the
mm,
one that we're familiar with in this whole list is Dysnomia. Dysnomia is the name of her single satellite. Her
mm.
single moon is dysnomia, and that's disorder. And that we know her as that's her primary moniker, if you would, of understanding Eris is that she creates disorder, but she doesn't do it by herself. It's a group action. Depending on what is happening in the human sphere and whatever quote crime or misdeed or something has occurred, this is what she will create and bring as the consequence to that type of human behavior.
So it's part of her process to push through the crises, to hopefully end up with something that is livable with. It does seem a bit depressing. I mean, I don't mean depressing, but sometimes I worry about these things that are very dark. Um, and it's not that we don't live through dark times and life has always been dark, but I think you need the Sagittarius moon somewhere in the middle of it to pick things up.
I think it's why we go through so many lifetimes that I think over time we balance it. But it's
Yeah,
the yin yang. We're dealing with light and dark.
yeah.
It's not always daytime. Sometimes it's night. And sometimes we sleep during the night and sometimes we're awake all night. But we're gonna travel down every road uh, before we're done.
Yeah. Tell me about Helen of Troy, because my impression, since being relatively new to Eris, is that she's a feminist fighter. Whereas the legend, the myth of Helen of Troy was she didn't actually do anything apart from be. It may be that she gave out an energy that actually sparked off the Trojan Wars. But she didn't herself go out there and do the fighting or any kind of di-
Let,
direct
let,
action.
let's go back to her origins. There were two sets of twins, two sets of Discuri.
Yeah,
We know about the Gemini twins. Well, there were also two women, two girls born at the same time, and
yeah,
that was Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra.
yeah.
And what in each case, one of the children was mortal and one was immortal.
Ah,
Helen was the immortal, and this came about because Zeus and Leda, who was another famous Greek personality, was I'm trying to think of her husband's name. She was married to she slept with her husband and with Zeus the same night.
they all
So
did. Yes.
yes, so two sets of twins were born.
Yeah,
And in each
yeah.
case, one was mortal, one was immortal. So Helen of Troy, to make the story short, Helen of Troy was the immortal twin, the immortal female twin,
Yeah. Mm.
and she was married to the king of Sparta.
Yeah.
And Sparta and Athens were rivals on the Greek peninsula, but it was Sparta was warlike, Athens was peaceful, and the war was really about Sparta and Troy.
Mm, mm,
And so, to make a long story short, uh, the apple that got tossed was to the fairest. I think everybody knows this story. The contest between Hera, Aphrodite, and Juno, and Aphrodite was chosen as the winner by Paris. Paris was the son of Priam, the king of Troy. Zeus did not want to be the judge because he was too close to all the participants, so he asked uh, uh, Paris to be the judge. Uh, Paris himself is an interesting character because he was the younger son of Priam, and the elder
mm,
son was Hector, who was the famous hero of the Trojan War
mm,
stories. He was always jealous of his older brother. He was felt insecure. He was not the same kind of strong personality that we think of, in the Greek culture. But at
mm,
any rate, he was chosen to be the judge, and he had a choice of great wealth, of being having empire or having Helen. He chose
mm,
Helen. Okay, and in some books that's the weaker of the three choices. He you
mm,
know he chose I don't want to say lust or passion, but he chose it over something that was much greater in the world
mm.
than and I don't want to say the love of a woman's not important. So not going to go there because we're going to get all
Yeah,
kinds of nasty comments. But
yeah,
but the point is he was immature. He was weak. So
yeah,
he ran off with Helen. And there's many variations of this theme. Euripides wrote a couple of plays where he
yeah.
actually described that Helen never really went to Troy, that it
Mm.
was it was only her image, her a ghost of Helen, if you would, who
A
actually went.
legend. Yeah.
Right, right. Who went there and actually did all the mischievous things that she did.
Mm,
She mimicked the wives of the Greeks hiding in their Trojan horse to get them to expose their presence to the Trojans. She did all kinds of really kind of nasty things. But the point being is that it was she's blamed as a wanton woman. I mean, she was married to the king of Sparta. So
mm.
why the heck was she going to run off with this young, excuse the expression, boy toy, Trojan boy toy, just because he won her in some kind of
He was
contest.
fanciful. Yeah.
Right, right. So, the whole thing's questionable. The point is that the history and the mythology and the stories that have come down all blame her as the culprit, as the reason
Yeah.
that the Trojan
Mm,
War was started was because
mm,
that she ran off with Priam, not Priam, with Paris. I
mm.
didn't even blame Paris. Uh, but the point is that uh, at the end of the Trojan War, there was a royal member of the Trojan family named Aeneas, and Aeneas is famous. He's in the Aeneid, was written about him.
Mm.
And he sailed to Italy. And 2,000 years later, his progeny
Mm.
founded the city of Rome.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when I think about the outcome of the Trojan War, I think about the creation of of a culture that it
Mm.
still exists to this day in one form or
Oh, yeah,
another. Okay,
yeah,
it's not an
yeah,
empire anymore, but in a way it is. The Catholic
yeah.
Church is an empire. It's just that it's religious, it's not physical, but it has its extension into just every part of the world.
Well,
So
the Romans' laws are everywhere still, 2,000 years on.
exactly.
So Helen was more, the legend of her was more the catalyst rather than her actually getting out there like Boadicea with her axe
Right.
in one hand and, chomping down
Right.
the opposition. No, that it really that is interesting. So she is one face of Eris, but
Yes.
there are presumably other faces of Eris, like Oprah Winfrey, who endure, if you like, in what they're doing. They keep pushing on. Uh,
Yes. I think each of us has our own face of Eris in one way or another, but it's a different face.
yeah.
Because each of us is different. No two of us are alike. Even, like I say, babies born side by side.
Um, Jackie Onassis, you wanted to talk about her.
Yes.
Um, that she was what? Well, anyway, I'll let you get on with it. But there was one bit that really struck me as interesting towards the end.
Oh, with Jackie? Well, I think Jackie is one of the most interesting figures in the 20th century.
Mm,
She was obviously born to great wealth, but she was highly intelligent. She represented Eris in so many different ways. The side of Eris that we like to believe, the strength of femininity, the
mm,
purity and I don't mean purity, any other expression except for ethically and consciously. She had very high consciousness. She was probably one of the greatest first ladies, in our history.
mm,
And she was a fifth house heiress, and it was conjunct Uranus, and they were both retrograde. So she came into this lifetime really to continue working on the individuality of what it meant to be a woman.
mm,
It was her prime directive to be an example to other women around the world in terms
mm,
of the power and the influence that a woman can have in the world
mm,
without feeling that they're overstepping their bounds or need to answer to anybody. And she survived, a tragedy that's unimaginable, absolutely unimaginable. To be riding, down the street and have her husband shot, inches from where she is, to be splattered with his blood, to have lived through that kind of experience, unimaginable, absolutely
mm.
unimaginable. I
You,
can't.
she had a very difficult father, I think, and the marriage with JFK was not all picnics and roses, since he wandered sideways quite
Well,
frequently.
clearly her childhood gave her the strength to become this kind of person. And what happened again, we have to look at her Pluto.
Yeah,
We have to understand that she what she brought in with her was
yeah,
that foundational energy, that ability to bounce back. And she was married to two of the most important men who ever walked on the planet. And she held her own. She wasn't in the shadows or in the background. She was as important, if some case just as important, and maybe in terms of Onassis even more important in terms of
mm.
who she was and the character that she expressed in the world. She was really quite a beautiful
And she
woman.
wanted, well, I think at that point she wanted protection, and Onassis had the money to give her it. He was not a pleasant man, bless him, but she had Pluto in Cancer, and Pluto in Cancer fascinates me because when Pluto was in Cancer from the First World War right through until the Second World War, it was what split up the family. Because in the First War, men went to war. Some of them, a lot of them didn't come back, but the women had to work during the war in a way they never had before. And that Pluto in Cancer, it changed women. And that is the point at which you began to get the push for suffragettes, for voting, for equality. And she has it very strongly in her ninth house, square her moon, and she's got an Aries moon. Again, fire moons are very helpful, I think. Um, uh,
Well, her sun and Mercury were in Leo. So that definitely brings her out of that Cancer mode that she was transitional moving through it.
mm.
Uh, the Pluto and Cancer generation, for the most part, women were Betty Crocker and men were Marlboro men. It's the
Mm.
best way to kind of categorize them. Men were men. They rode horses. What they were outdoorsy. Women stayed home and raised children.
Well,
But
you
she,
see, I think this is where there's a different experience in America, which was not really involved. In Europe, I mean, the First War wrecked families. It had the most cataclysmic effect. If you look at well, even in France, I mean, the death rate was just off the Richter charts. It was ghastly. America kind of was fairly still in the John Wayne era, if you like, at that point. But as far as this is what you have to watch with astrology because you create all sorts of scenarios that fit your own and your own culture's experience. And then you look at China and it was doing something completely different. So one has to watch slightly. But I think Pluto in Cancer did make a tremendous difference to women overall. I don't know when America got voting rights for women, probably sometime during that time. And although there's not quite as much in terms of equality legislation, there certainly was in Europe. But the thing I was going to say about Jackie, her Eris trines her ninth house, Mercury and Sun. And what she latterly did in the last 20 years of her life, when she seemed to be happy, was, I think, working in publishing, which is a real ninth house experience. And
yes.
that's when she found her bliss, if you like, and she was more out of the public eye and she didn't have to um, be a presence, as it were. Uh, it, but no, she certainly had an extraordinary life. Um, and one wouldn't wish high
So
political
she,
office
she,
on
she,
anyone.
she also had, her South Node in Pisces in her 12th house. Again, she brought this in with her, Marjorie. It was not her the first time around the block experiencing what it meant to be a woman from a very,
Mm,
enlightened perspective. She had done this before in one way or another. She could have, been she held a position of power
mm,
as a woman,
mm,
or she had perhaps had a number of lifetimes in a position of power as a man and learned what it was to hold that power and be able to balance in it and honor it, express it in a way that it helped everybody. So she came into this lifetime really
mm,
educated about power, if you would. So as a woman, she was able to manage it and
mm,
express it, as beautifully as she did.
yeah.
But clearly, she has had, a 12th house South Node. She's clearly had lifetimes where community and understanding and participating in the world around her in a positive way was part
Mm,
of who she was.
yeah.
It wasn't new to her.
Yeah, that the Taurus North Node is I've always found quite tricky for people to handle. It does tend to bring fairly turbulent lives until they finally, with luck, manage to settle at the end of it. Now, do you have time to do Julian Assange, or
I'll,
is your
I'll
voice
just,
running out?
before we move on, in reference to North Node and Taurus, I have to say mea culpa.
Has it been turbulent?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. This is my fourth career. Okay, they were all good. They were all good, but this is the one that has stuck after all these years.
We're all very happy you've ended up where you've ended up. Uh, um, Julian Assange is an odd personality because he obviously made a huge difference. But he didn't seem to be a particularly pleasant man. And some of the things he did, which the progressive left thought were wonderful, actually did some damage. So I'm in kind of two minds about him.
Well, I wanted a guy, and I wanted a guy who lived colored outside the lines,
Mm,
and so he was a perfect example. I do applaud him for what he did. I respect him for what he had to endure.
mm,
Uh,
mm, mm,
because somebody had to do it. And so
mm.
he tossed the apple at the State Department and Congress and made them reveal what was going on behind the scenes because they're supposed to be uh, uh, what's the word?
Mm,
Visibility. They're supposed to be we're supposed to know what's happening in the halls of Congress and not have to, be
mm,
left in the dark and let them make all their decisions. So he shed light into dark corners, and so I think he's very, very much a
mm,
example of Eris because it's what Eris did. Eris, he threw the apple and he created WikiLeaks, and yes, he paid the price for it, but
mm.
I he was a patriot. There's no question that he
Yeah.
was a patriot.
Well, and he's got his Eris con exactly conjunct Chiron. So going back to your point, there was something that needed to be healed, needed to be blasted out into uh, the open.
Yes.
Um, but and interestingly, his Chiron and Eris are exactly square the USA Sun if for the 1776 chart. I know you use the 1775 chart, but there was something about him that was very key to what was going on.
Well, they were in his fifth house as well. So
Mm,
he was born to, express his personality and develop his individuality.
mm,
And he did it, politically. It doesn't matter how we do it, everybody's going to do it differently, but he did it all the
mm,
way. He didn't go halfway and say, no, this is too scary. He was not held back by insecurity. He was able to, work with all of the karmic necessities that kept popping up in front of him and
mm,
overcome them or absorb them or somehow just, find out how to just survive them. And
mm,
and his son is in cancer too. I think though he was not American, I think that he had a true emotional attachment to just I don't say a national personality, but maybe an international personality to recognize, people don't all have wear a label what country they're from. They're people. In
mm,
essence, there's only one of us on this planet. And, the fact that we are divided in so many different ways really does not change the unity of who we are as a civilization, as a planet. I think what the time frame we're coming into is really going to reveal that because we're going to begin to experience situations and things happening that are not bound by by borders and boundaries that
mm,
they spill across those boundaries and affect all of us equally in one way or another because one of the lessons that we need to learn is that there really is just one of us. There's one species on the planet. I don't
mm,
care what color they are, what gender they are, or what language they speak. There's
yeah,
just one of us here.
mm. Mind you, I think you're right about the Australians. They are very outspoken, and they tend to get in there fighting. But what's interesting is that his Eris Chiron oppose Uranus and square the Sun. So he's got Uranus in there. And reading about Eris, it made me think a lot. I've got a very strong Uranus in my chart, as most astrologers would have. It there's something about Eris that reminds me of Uranus quite a lot.
Yes, you mentioned that. They're both disruptive. They
Yeah.
both, yeah, they both are unwilling to accept the status quo.
mm,
they do it a little bit differently though, because Uranus will do it again through karmic necessity, through crisis,
mm,
but it's still a long-term kind of procedure. The it
yeah,
we don't get smacked upside the head, the first time we need a course correction.
mm,
It takes many repetitions of committing the same quote
mm,
error until our soul comes along and says,
mm,
okay, that's enough. This is
mm.
the direction you need to go. Eris is doesn't give us that time frame. Eris just steps in, tosses the ball, and walks away, and then it's up to you to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. This has been most informative. And I do hope we can do it again at some point.
I would love to do it again. I would love at some point to when my manuscript is done to be able to sit down with you and really talk about this major event that's unfolding here in the United States. I know you're in England. Um, my English publisher doesn't want to print it because it's only about America. But I don't see it that way. I
Yeah.
see that this is a world event and it's going to begin here and then
Mm.
spread around the world, or it already has. So,
Well,
but
we're all dependent on America. In a way, America is where Britain was about 150 years ago, but we didn't have social media in those days or the television pictures all over the place. So we're all rooting for America to get more civilized, please, and be a bit calmer.
yeah.
But it probably isn't going to happen anytime soon, but we will keep hoping about it and we will talk again soon.
You choose the topic, I will be here.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you
Cheers.
so much, Marjorie. This has been a
Okay.
great pleasure to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.